The silence he bought. The cabin cost Armin Voss $11,000, a cracked shoulder blade, and the last conversation he ever had with his ex-wife Priya. He signed the deed on a rainy Thursday in October, took his truck north until the GPS surrendered, and kept driving. The mountain had no name on any map he owned. The road to the cabin was mostly a suggestion, 2 tire ruts pressed into pine needles, running parallel until they didn't. Armin didn't care. He had bought the silence on purpose. After 3 years working covert security contracts in Eastern Europe and 4 failed attempts at therapy, silence felt like the only honest thing left. The cabin itself was rough but solid. 1 main room, a cast-iron stove, a loft with a mattress that smelled of old cedar, and a cellar door set into the floorboards near the kitchen corner that the listing had described, without irony, as additional storage. He cooked kin soup over the stove that first evening, listening to wind push against the eaves. No phone signal, no satellite dish, nothing but trees going dark outside the single window, and the kind of quiet that has weight to it, the kind that presses on your ears until your own heartbeat becomes company. He was almost asleep when he heard it. A low, rhythmic sound. Not animal, not pipes settling. Something with a cadence, almost like machinery counting to itself. It came from beneath the floorboards, beneath the cellar door, from somewhere that the listing had very specifically not mentioned. Armin sat up. Old instincts don't retire. He reached under the mattress for the combat knife he'd carried for 9 years and crossed the floor in his socks, crouching beside the cellar door. The sound was cleaner now, a pulse, almost biological, but metallic at the edges, like a heartbeat filtered through copper wire. He pulled the door open. The stairs went down further than they should have. The house was built on a shallow mountain shelf. There shouldn't have been room for more than 6 feet of earth. But the stairs continued past the cellar's natural floor, into a seam in the rock that had been widened by something that wasn't a drill. The cuts in the stone were too precise, too smooth. The angles were wrong in a way that made the back of his neck go cold. At the bottom, light pulsed from the walls, a faint, aqueous blue, coming from panels embedded in the rock itself. Equipment Armin couldn't name lined the far wall. Crystalline rods, breathing softly with internal light. Curved surfaces that bent the shadows around them. A central plinth of black material that hummed at a frequency he felt in his molars rather than heard. And against the far wall, on the ground, surrounded by scattered fragments of what might have been armor, was a woman, or something shaped like one. She was tall, even lying down. Armin estimated nearly 6 feet if she stood. Her skin was a deep, warm bronze but shimmered at the edges, like heat rising off summer asphalt. Her hair was silver white and cropped close on the sides, longer at the crown, matted now with something dark that wasn't quite blood. Her eyes were closed. Her armor, it was armor, he was certain of that, was cracked across the chest and left shoulder, and beneath the cracks, a faint luminescence leaked out like a wound that glowed instead of bled. She was breathing. Armin stood at the bottom of those impossible stairs and held his knife and breathed slowly and did absolutely nothing for almost 30 seconds. Every piece of training he had said, retreat, report, establish a perimeter. Every piece of whatever was left of his humanity said, she is injured. She is alone. She is afraid. Her eyes opened. They were amber. Deeply, impossibly amber, and they locked onto his with an intelligence that was ancient and immediate at once. She did not flinch. She did not reach for a weapon. She looked at him the way a soldier looks at another soldier across a neutral border, assessing, yes, but also recognizing. She said something. Her voice was low, layered somehow, like 2 voices at slightly different pitches occupying the same breath. He didn't understand the words. But then she stopped, pressed her hand flat against the stone floor, and looked up at him again. And this time, what she said arrived in English, as if the language had simply been retrieved from somewhere and placed in her mouth. You are the one who bought this place. It wasn't a question. Armin crouched down, keeping the knife low and visible, but not threatening. Who are you? He asked. She looked at the knife with no particular fear. I am Ven, she said, and I have been waiting for whoever arrived here first. I made sure it would be someone like you. Someone like me, he repeated. Broken enough to listen, she said quietly. Brave enough not to run. The blue light pulsed between them. Outside, far above, wind moved through pines. And Armin Voss, who had bought silence, realized the silence had been a door. He was already through it. The offer beneath the stars. She didn't ask for his help so much as she arranged the facts until helping was the only reasonable conclusion. Over the course of that first night and into the gray mountain dawn, Vin told him what she could. There had been a war. She didn't say between whom, only that it spanned sectors of space that human astronomy hadn't named yet. Her ship had taken damage over this system. The crash had been controlled enough to preserve the chamber, the equipment, her life. Barely. She had been here 11 weeks, healing at a rate that was slower than it should have been because the atmospheric chemistry of Earth was slightly wrong for her biology, like breathing air with too much of one gas and not quite enough of another. You need me to protect you while you heal, Armin said. I need you not to report me, she corrected. Protection is the second thing. What's the first? She met his eyes. Supplies. Protein. Minerals. My regenerative system requires input or it cannibalizes muscle tissue. She said it plainly, without embarrassment, but something shifted in her expression, a flicker of what he recognized after a moment as pride being overridden by necessity. She hated asking. He understood that feeling. Okay, he said. And in return, that was when she told him about the others. Her ship hadn't been alone. 3 others had been in pursuit when she crossed into this system. 1 had burned up on entry. 2 had not. She believed they had landed or crashed somewhere within 200 kilometers. They were not like her. She was a scout, trained for long silence and careful movement. They were hunters, enforcers of the faction she had been running from. They will find me eventually, she said. When they do, anyone near me becomes a liability. A human who has sheltered me becomes evidence. She paused. I can protect you from them. I know their methods. I know their technology. Alone, you would not survive a single encounter. And together? Together, she said, we would have a chance. Armin was quiet for a long time. He looked around the chamber, the glowing walls, the crystalline equipment, the woman who glowed faintly where her armor had cracked, and thought about Priya, who had said he was only alive when danger was present. He had argued at the time. He wasn't sure he could argue now. How long to heal completely? 3 weeks. Perhaps 4. What do I tell people who ask why I'm up here? You tell them you bought a cabin to disappear. People believe that story. You have the face for it. He almost smiled. You've been watching me since I arrived. Since before, she admitted. The property listing. The buyer profile your lawyer filed. I routed myself to this location because the algorithm suggested you were the optimal candidate. You hacked a real estate database from a crashed spaceship in a mountain. Yes. This time he did smile, brief and reluctant. I'm going into town for supplies tomorrow. Make a list. He paused. In English. And then, if you're lying to me about any of this, I won't call anyone. I'll handle it myself. She looked at him steadily. I know. That is also why I chose you. The second week, she moved better. She came upstairs for the first time on a Tuesday, wearing a kind of adaptive garment. Not Earth clothing, but something her ship had synthesized that approximated it. Charcoal gray and fitted close. Without the armor, she looked less like a warrior and more like what she was beneath that. A person, exhausted and far from home. Armin was at the stove when she appeared at the top of the cellar stairs. He handed her a mug of black tea without comment, and she held it in both hands and looked out the window at the snow that had started in the night. It's colder than the models predicted, she said. Welcome to October in the mountains. She watched the snow for a long time. Then quietly. On my world, precipitation is regulated. I have never seen weather happen without someone intending it. Armin looked at her. Does that make this better or worse? Strange, she said. Wildly, uncomfortably strange. And something in her voice when she said it, the edge of wonder underneath the discipline, made the cabin feel smaller and warmer than it had any right to. That night she sat across from him at the table while he cleaned his rifle, and she watched the way his hands moved with the calm focus of someone who had taken apart and reassembled that particular worry many times. She asked him about his work. He told her, not the classified pieces, but the shape of it. The years of operating in spaces where right and wrong had stopped being useful categories. The moment he'd decided he was done. What made you stop? She asked. He set down the bolt carrier. I watched someone on my team make a choice I would have made 3 years earlier, and it made me sick. He looked at his hands. I didn't recognize myself in him. I recognized myself in what he did to the other guy. She was quiet. Then, Growth is disorienting. That's one word for it. The fire in the stove spoke between them. Outside, snow built slowly in the pine branches. Vin reached across the table and placed her fingertips briefly on the back of his hand. Just that, just a moment, warm and deliberate. You are not what I expected a human to be, she said. What did you expect? She withdrew her hand. Less. When the forest moves. The soldiers arrived on a Wednesday. Not alien hunters, human ones. 3 black SUVs moving up the mountain road in the pre-dawn gray, headlights off, engines careful. Armin spotted them from the loft window before they were within a quarter mile, because in 9 years of this kind of work, you learn what the absence of headlights means. It means whoever is driving doesn't want to be seen arriving. He woke Vin with 2 fingers on her shoulder. She was awake before he finished the motion. Combat sleep. She recognized the same thing in him. Her amber eyes adjusted to darkness instantly. 3 vehicles, he breathed. Human, military, or paramilitary. Probably tracking heat signature or tech emissions from the chamber. She sat up. Her expression was controlled, but he had been studying her long enough to read the tells. A slight tightening around the jaw, a stillness in her shoulders that wasn't rest. The chamber is shielded. They may not know what they're tracking. They may only know an anomaly. How do you want to play this? She looked at him for a fraction of a second, and in that fraction he saw her make a real decision, not a tactical one. She was deciding whether to trust the plan he hadn't offered yet. Tell me, she said. He told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, You do the cabin. I will stay below unless they breach. If they breach, we improvise. He met her eyes. Together. Something moved across her face. Together, she agreed. The lead agent's name was Garrett Wills, and he had the particular look of a man who had been handed this assignment because someone more important didn't want to make the drive. He knocked on the cabin door at 6:07 a.m. with 3 agents flanking him and showed Armin a federal identification that could have been real or exceptional forgery. Armin had seen both. Mr. Voss, we're conducting a survey of unusual electromagnetic readings in this region. You mind if we come in? Armin leaned in the doorframe in his thermal undershirt, coffee mug in hand, looking like precisely the man the cabin listing described. Tired, private, wanting to be left alone. Yeah, actually, I mind. Wills smiled the way people smile when the law is a formality they've decided to perform. This is a routine sweep, sir. Won't take long. Do you have a warrant? The smile held. We don't need one for an external survey. May we walk the perimeter? Armin stepped back and gestured at the forest. Be my guest. He stood in the doorway and watched them work. They had equipment, handheld scanners, earpieces, a body language that said they'd done this before. One of them crouched near the cabin's foundation on the east side for a long time, and Armin kept his breathing even and drank his coffee. In the cellar, he knew, Vin was doing something with the chamber's field emitters. She had explained it the night before as analogous to turning down a speaker, not off, which would leave a visible absence, but modulated to blend with the natural electromagnetic texture of the mountain. Whether it was working was a question he wouldn't be able to answer until Wills either stayed or left. Wills left. He left with the same smile and a business card pressed into Armin's palm and a parting line about how they'd probably be back to run follow-up checks. Which meant they'd be back. Which meant the clock was running. He closed the door and leaned his back against it and exhaled. 30 seconds later, the cellar door opened and Vin came up the stairs, moving smoothly now, most of the armor's damage sealed. She looked at his face. They'll return, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Then we need to accelerate the healing timeline. How? She came to stand directly in front of him, closer than she'd stood before, close enough that he could feel the subtle warmth she radiated, that ambient heat that wasn't feverish, just different from human temperature. The regenerative process responds to proximity biofields, she said. Organic resonance. A heartbeat at close range activates the accelerants faster than the equipment alone. He looked at her steadily. You're telling me you heal faster if someone is physically near you? Yes. And you're only mentioning this now. Something flickered in her amber eyes. I didn't want to ask. He moved from the door and sat on the edge of the table, arms folded, keeping his breathing level. Okay, he said. What does proximity mean exactly? Shared sleep space, she said. 8 to 10 hours. The biofield is strongest in delta sleep states. A long pause. Outside, pine branches shifted in cold wind. "All right," said Armin. That first night, she lay on the outside edge of the cedar mattress, and he lay on the inside, and there was a foot of careful distance between them. He fell asleep listening to her breathing. Not human breathing, slightly slower, a different rhythm, like a tide instead of a clock. When he woke in the small hours, she had turned toward him in sleep, one hand loose on the mattress between them, silver-white hair fallen across her jaw, the faint glow of her healing skin making the dark room look like the inside of a paper lantern. He did not move the distance between them, but he did not move away. The gravity between two worlds. The hunters came on the 18th day, not like the human agents, careful and procedural. These came through the forest at 2 in the morning like weather. Armin heard them first as pressure, not sound, a low displacement of air, the way a truck moving fast on a highway pushes a wall of silence ahead of itself. Vin was already sitting up when he opened his eyes. "Kale," she said. One word, and the way she said it told him everything about their history, the kind of single-word fear that only comes from close familiarity with what a person is capable of. One of the enforcers? Their best. She was already moving, pulling on the adaptive garment, reaching for the partially restored armor pieces she'd been rebuilding in the chamber. "He tracks neural resonance. He's been following my biofield for 3 weeks. I masked it, but proximity healing," she said, and looked at him, "leaves a doubled signature. He found the pair of us." Armin was already dressed. He pulled the rifle from under the bed. "Tell me what he's afraid of." She paused, looked at him. "What? Everything has a weakness. Tell me his." For 1 second, he saw something new move across her face, something he hadn't seen in 3 weeks of watching her carefully. It looked like the beginning of belief. "He doesn't process discontinuous movement," she said. "His tracking systems assume linear approach. If you move in a pattern he cannot predict, his target acquisition lags. Broken pattern. Irregular intervals." Armin nodded. "I can do that." "Armin." She stopped him at the top of the cellar stairs. "If this fails, if he takes me, you run. North. There is a frequency in the chamber's secondary emitter that will mask a human biosign. I will set it before we go out. You stay inside it and run." He looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" Her jaw tightened. "It's what I'm telling you." "That's not the same thing." The forest outside the window went briefly bright, a blue-white pulse, moving between the trees. "No," she admitted. Quietly. "It is not." What followed was 22 minutes of the most concentrated violence Armin had experienced since leaving the work, and in some ways more, because at least in those contracts, he had understood roughly what he was fighting. Kale was enormous and fast in a way that didn't match his size, wearing armor that seemed to absorb the dark rather than reflect it. He came for the cabin directly, which was the overconfidence of someone who had never been challenged on approach. Armin broke left from the doorway and moved in the jagged diagonal pattern he used for clearing rooms. Never 2 steps in the same line. Never a predictable vector. It worked. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. Kale's first strike hit the cabin wall 8 inches to the right of where Armin had been standing. Armin put 3 rounds into the joint between the enforcer's helmet and chest piece from 6 feet. Rounds that would have dropped any human being had minimal effect, but they bought seconds. Ven came from the tree-line. She moved like something designed for this, because she was fully armored now, cracked plates and all. She hit Kale from his unguarded left, and the impact shook the ground. They fought in a way that Armin's brain could barely follow. Too fast, too focused. Exchanges that lasted fractions of seconds and left gouges in the earth. He watched for his opening. It came when Kale drove Ven into the cabin wall and pinned her there, both hands, pressing to use his mass advantage. She had told Armin, discontinuous movement. Kale's systems had recalibrated to Ven and were tracking her exclusively. He had forgotten the human. Armin closed the distance in 4 broken pattern strides, drove a combat blade into the power coupling at the back of Kale's armor that Ven had described 3 nights ago when they'd sat at the table and he'd asked her to teach him everything, and twisted. The armor ceased. Went dark. Kale dropped. The forest was quiet. Ven stood against the wall, breathing hard. Armor cracked worse than before, that faint luminescence bleeding through the new damage. She looked at Kale on the ground, then at Armin. "You remembered what I told you," she said. "I remember everything you tell me." She looked at him for a long time. Then she crossed the ground between them, and put her hands on his face. Both hands. Warm palms. The way someone touches something they were afraid they were about to lose. He stayed very still. Armin, she said. His name in her voice, with that double layering, like hearing it said twice at once by two versions of the same certainty. I know, he said. He didn't know what she'd been about to say, but he meant it anyway. She kissed him, not urgently, with that particular care of someone doing something for the first time and wanting to do it right. He brought his hands up to her waist and kissed her back, and the faint glow where her armor had cracked pressed warm against his chest, and the pines above them moved in the dark, and the cabin stood witness. They stayed like that for a long time, in the cold mountain dark, her forehead against his when they finally broke, her hands still holding his face. I am not finished healing, she said. I know. When I am, I have to make a decision about what comes next. For both of us. I know that too. She pulled back just enough to look at him. You are the strangest human I have studied. You studied humans before buying the cabin? Extensively. The edge of something real moved through her expression. None of the others made me feel like this. He took her hands from his face and held them. Come inside, he said. We'll deal with him, a nod toward Kale. In the morning. Tonight you need to sleep. They went inside. She did not sleep on the edge of the mattress. Neither did he. The choice the stars could not make for him. On the 23rd day, Vin was healed. She told him in the morning, standing in the cabin's single shaft of mountain sunlight that came through the east window every morning at 7:12, and she said it plainly, the way she said most true things, without softening it or dressing it with what came before. The regeneration is complete. I am functional. Armin poured 2 mugs of coffee and set one in front of her without comment. He had known it was coming. He had felt it in the way her warmth had shifted over the past 3 days, fuller somehow, more present, like a signal finding its range. What happens now, he asked. She curled both hands around the mug. She had adopted this habit from him, the holding, and he had never pointed it out because he liked it too much. I have 2 options, she said. I can attempt to repair the ship's communication array and send a signal to my own people, what remains of the faction I serve. They would come for me. It would take approximately 6 weeks. And the second option? She looked at the window. I stay. I finish the work I was originally sent here to do, mapping this system's defensive profile, assessing the threat level for my people. She paused. It would take longer. Months. And me, he said. In both versions. She set the mug down, looked at him directly. In the first version, you become a risk I have to manage. The people who come for me will want to assess whether you are a security concern, whether you need to have your memory altered. And the second. In the second version, she said, and her voice shifted, that double layer going quieter, more human, as it sometimes did now when she was speaking from somewhere beneath the protocol. You are the person I am doing this with. You know what I am, where I am from, what is coming. You cannot unknow it. And I would not want you to. The fire in the stove ticked. Outside, the mountain was doing what it did all morning, going gradually golden as the sun climbed. You're asking me to choose, Armin said. I am telling you the truth so you can. He stood, walked to the window. The forest below the cabin was dense and green-black and beautiful in a way he hadn't noticed when he arrived because he hadn't been looking. He had been looking inward. He had bought silence to look inward. And instead the world had sent him outward, as far outward as possible. He turned around. There are 2 more of them out there, he said. The other hunters who didn't crash. Yes. And whatever they're looking for, whatever this war is, it's going to find Earth regardless of what we decide in this cabin. Yes. So running doesn't help anyone. She watched him. Steady, amber-eyed, warm. No, she said. It does not. Then I need you to teach me everything, he said. Not just Kale's weakness. Everything. What this war is. Who is fighting. What Earth looks like from outside it. What we're actually up against. Something happened in her expression that he had seen only once before. The night she told him she was healing faster and couldn't keep pretending it was only the equipment. It was the particular look of someone being surprised by their own relief. And you, she said. What do you offer? I know this mountain, he said. Every trail, every shelter, every blind spot in a surveillance grid. I know how governments look for things they don't want to admit exist. I know how soldiers think when they're afraid, which is when they're most dangerous. He crossed to where she sat. And I know how to stay alive next to someone I'm not willing to lose. She stood. They were close, the distance of something decided. Armin Voss, she said, the name layered in that particular way that made it sound like an answer and a question at once. Then, he said back. Simple. One note. She reached up and held his jaw in one hand, the way she had in the dark after the fight, with that careful fullness, that first-time precision that had somehow never become routine. She kissed him, and he kissed her back, and outside the mountain held its light. Later, they went down into the chamber together. She showed him systems he would need to understand, and he showed her how he had mapped the access trails on paper, old practice, untraceable. And they built the beginning of a plan the way people build things when they intend to be there for the completion of it, with care, without hurry. He made dinner. She sat across from him and ate and watched the snow come back outside. The same snow she had called wildly, uncomfortably strange on the first night she came upstairs. She no longer looked uncomfortable. She looked, if he was reading her right, and he was getting very good at reading her right, like someone who had arrived somewhere. That night, before they slept, she said, the others will find us. Perhaps weeks. Perhaps sooner. I know. It will not be like Kale. There will be more of them. I know that too. You are not afraid. He was quiet for a moment. I'm afraid of the right things, he said. I've been afraid of the wrong things for a long time. This, he didn't specify what this was, but she understood, is not one of them. She was quiet. Then, I chose correctly. You chose a broken man with a combat knife who lives in the mountains. Yes, she said. I chose precisely. He turned off the lamp. The chamber below pulsed its faint blue. The forest beyond the walls held whatever it held, distance, weather, threat, time. Armin Voss had come here to find silence. What he had found instead was something louder and truer and vastly more alive than silence had ever promised to be. He had found a war worth fighting. He had found a reason to still be good at what he was. And in the warm dark of a mountain cabin above the clouds, with a woman from a world he couldn't name sleeping beside him with her hand against his chest and her heartbeat at its slow, tide-like pace, he had found the thing he had driven north with a cracked shoulder and a signed deed and 9 years of damage to look for.